Welcome, everyone. We are opening the cycle of Arqus Alumni Talks. This session will take place from February to December with the participation of alumni from the 9 institutions of the Arqus Alliance and will be recorded. All the alumni talks will focus in the topics related to integration in the labor market, beginning of professional life and professional career. Please feel invited to participate in the next alumni talks. The first alumni talk is promoted by the University of Minho, and today we have Professor Rui Gomes, Assistant Professor at the School of Psychology and at the University of Minho, and Liliana Fontes, Invited Professor at the same school. The main topic of this alumni talk is stress management and high performance, and we hope you enjoy this session, which will certainly inspire you in your academic and professional life. At the final minutes of this session, participants will be able to ask the speakers any questions you may have. Thank you very much, Professor Rui Gomes and Liliana Fontes, for being with us. We wish you all an inspired session.
Okay, many thanks, Carla. Good morning, all. First of all, let me thank the invitation to be here today. This presentation will be done by me and my colleague, Liliana Fontes. We are going to talk about stress management and implications to perform in these situations. A small summary, we are going to talk about data on occupational stress. Then all of you are going to be invited to fulfill a small questionnaire to evaluate your readiness for stress management. Then the major topic, we are going to speak about stress and burnout and some final thoughts. Well, let's start by the data. This topic of occupational stress now these days is a big one in research, in academia, and also in society. The topic has great relevance, not only for researchers, but also for the general community. To demonstrate this idea, taking in consideration some data presented by, for example, World Health Organization, globally around 12 billion working days are lost annually due to anxiety and depression problems. Anxiety and depression are two major consequences of occupational stress. Close to 80% of workers report having felt significant levels of stress in the last year. I would say that this is not a surprising result. In fact, research over the years has demonstrated that professional settings are becoming more and more stressful for all the individuals. But this result of 22% of workers report feeling high stress throughout the entire working period, this one is a major one. This is due to the fact that these individuals report that their working settings are very stressful, not only for a specific period of time, but for a longer period of time. This is a major condition to chronic occupational stress and to very bad consequence of occupational stress, that is burnout, that we are going to talk briefly in this presentation. So this is the numbers. However, in a positive perspective, every dollar invested in mental health returns of $4 in increased productivity. So this is a very interesting point to organizations and even states, governments that investing, putting money in preventing occupational stress is also a good politic due the return in terms of investment. So, in terms of costs, American companies report $300 billion per year in terms of absenteeism, low productivity, turnover, and healthcare. It's responsible for 25% of absenteeism in the European Union during periods of 2 or more weeks. And it costs EU member states around 20 billion euros annually. These costs are very relevant and are now very known in society. The topic of occupational stress became well known, I would say, in the last 2 decades of the last century. And now it's a problem we have widely known in our occupational contexts. It's interesting. We have been studying the topic of occupational stress for, I would say, a long period in several professionals activities, and even in students. This presentation is for students. We are also very interested in knowing the effects of occupational stress in this activity. For example, this questionnaire, occupational stress questionnaire for students, evaluate academic performance, academic evaluation, motivation, learning, work overload, future expectations, and financial problems. And some data we have already of our study reveals that work overload is the major stressor for students, followed by academic evaluation and academic performance. I would say that it's quite interesting that work overload is the major stressor. In fact, when we compare the stressors of different professional activities, it's quite the same for other professionals. Work overload tends to be the major stressor for different professionals. So it's quite interesting that even in academic community for students, it's also the major source of stress. So, taking the words of International Work Organization, stress has become the most serious health problem of the 20th century, a problem not only on a physical and mental level for individuals, but also for employers and governments who are beginning to see the financial losses. So, in summary, we started by looking at stress at an individual level, looking at the costs for the individual, but now we have a much more global perspective of stress, and it's quite evident that stress is higher levels of stress are not only bad for the individual, but also for teams, groups, organizations, and even states, governments. So all of these persons, individuals, are quite aware of the negative effects of being exposed to higher levels of stress or chronic stress. So let's proceed to your evaluation, to stress management, to evaluate stress management readiness. Liliana, can you proceed, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me just say very quickly, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation to the organization. It's a pleasure to see 50 people here in the morning, all very interested in stress, in this topic of stress, and maybe how we can manage it. Okay, so thank you, Professor Rui, for the very bleak, very negative picture you've just painted us about stress, occupational stress. Let's hope that by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to give you a bit of more positive and outlook on the future. But for now, we would like to ask you, to fill in a short questionnaire. It's a very short questionnaire on your stress management readiness. I will leave the links here in the meeting group chat. So we have two links, one in English, which is here. We have the QR code right here, and another one in Portuguese. So if you speak Portuguese, if you're comfortable in Portuguese, you can use the Portuguese link. If not, use the English one. It's the exact same thing, but in different languages, of course. Now, just a couple of things before you begin. If you leave your email, you will receive an email automatically at the end with your results. We do not care about your email. We don't want to know. We will not even, we will remove that variable from our database. If you do not want to leave your email, you will still have your results at the end of the questionnaire. You can just take a print screen or save it as a PDF, and you'll have those results, well, for whenever you want. So I'll give you a few minutes to just complete that, and then we'll talk a bit about what you've just done, okay? I think 5 minutes will be enough. Please let us know if you have any problems. Okay, I see that we already have a few answers in progress. That's great. You can always return to this questionnaire whenever you'd like. Take it again. See how your stress management skills have evolved over time. Okay, more people answering, that's great. Okay, we already have a couple of answers submitted. It's great. Okay, so from looking at your faces, the ones I can see at least, it seems to me that most of you have probably finished by now. If you haven't, that's okay. You can just keep doing it, or you can do it at the end. It's just fine. So if you entered your email, you will receive this in your email. If you haven't, you will see it at the end of the questionnaire. Just print it or save the web page so you can consult it in the future. Now, there are several results here. This one, as you can see, there are 3 different areas that we look into, and these 3 areas reflect the way we look at the phenomenon of stress, the way our research group looks at this phenomenon. So here you have the 4 categories, the 4 scoring categories, and these mean the first one can improve, the second one good, then very good, and the top category excellent. So ideally, we would like to see all of your results in the very good or excellent categories. If they are not, do not despair. This is a life skill that can be taught, can be learned, and can be practiced. So it can be developed. So you need not despair, okay? Now, as for the first area, adaptive stimuli, this relates to the stress level in everyday life. So how does your daily life, the situations, your context, how does that contribute to your stressful experience? Second area, we look into the cognitive appraisal. So how do we perceive, how do we evaluate, how do we face the stressor? More linked to our perception of the event and of our own skills. And finally, how we react to it. So all our responses, all our reactions to stress, the physiological reactions, the behavioral reactions, etc. Then we have the readiness results. How ready are you to actually implement this life skill in your life? 3 different subscales again. So the first one is the specific readiness, how prepared you are to assume to implement this life skill. General readiness relates to your satisfaction, how satisfied you are with your readiness to assume the life skill. And finally, the total readiness, which is an average of the previous 2. Again, same categories. The higher the scores, the better. We want you to be as ready as possible to implement your stress management skill in your life. Now, let's look a bit about stress itself. So we've been talking about stress for about 20 minutes, but what is it? How do we look at it? How do we, as a research group, look at this phenomenon? Well, so for us, stress is a set of internal and external factors which we call stress factors, the antecedents, factors that can be more related to ourselves. So our personality, for example, will always have an impact on the way we look at stress. External factors as well, external situations that may trigger stressful situations. Now, these factors, they must change our functioning. It can be in a positive or a negative direction, but they have to change the way we function. They have to have enough power, so to speak, to change the way we function. And this is where we're at with cognitive appraisal. Several appraisals, so to speak, that we make. First of all, we look at the event, at the stressful situation, and we try to determine how important it is to us. Now, this is a tricky one. We don't want importance to be too high, but we don't want it to be too low either. It has to be just right. Very hard to achieve. If it's too important, then we start to neglect other areas of our lives and things become too important for us, making it harder for us to function. However, too little importance, and well, it doesn't really drive us. If we find something not at all important, we won't be driven, motivated to achieve. Then we enter in the challenge versus threat appraisal. And this can be a continuum. So we look at the situation and we think, is this something that challenges me? Is it something that's a challenge to me? Or is it more of a threat? Is it a threat to my self-esteem? Is it a threat to my way of life? The more we see things as a challenge and not as a threat, the more likely it is that we will have a positive adaptation by the end. So what we want in intervention is to raise challenge appraisals and decrease threat appraisals. Finally, we look into our coping and control perceptions. So coping, do I feel like I have enough resources to deal with the demands of the situation? The more resources I feel that I have, the better. And how much do I feel that I control the situation? If I feel like I have some degree of control over the situation, the outcome will probably be better than when I feel that I have absolutely no control over the situation, and it's the other way around. It's the situation that controls me. And finally, the third pillar, so to speak, of our model, we have our internal and external factors that change our functioning, and they must have enough power to produce different states, to have a consequence. We can have positive or negative consequences. So when we deal with the stress factors accurately, when we have positive cognitive appraisals, we will very likely have better consequences in the form of motivation and focus regarding the task. On the other hand, when we cannot deal with the stress factors, when our appraisals are more threatening, when we feel like we have less resources and less control, then we can have negative states which can eventually result in burnouts. And so when you look at your results at these three areas, they reflect the three pillars of our model. Area one, the stress factors. How is the situation? How do we look at stress in our everyday lives? The second area regarding cognitive appraisal, what are our perceptions regarding the situation and our resources? And finally, how we react to the event. What our reactions are. Are there more positive or more negative reactions? And that will have an effect in the final results. So if you thought that things were bleak in the first part of this presentation, now we're going for burnout. Burnout, very, very bleak and quite negative psychological phenomenon, which I truly hope none of you have ever experienced, but is unfortunately growing more and more common. Now we have this definition here from Maslow. It's from 1981, a bit old, but it's still quite current in its description of the phenomenon. So burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that's caused by excessive and prolonged stress due to persistent dedication to a goal that cannot be achieved. Now, if you decompose this definition, you'll see that we have three different major things happening here. Now, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to have someone that is persistently dedicated to achieve a goal that cannot be achieved. So someone that's trying to do something that is impossible. And it keeps doing this day in, day out, day after day, giving it their all to something that cannot be achieved. Now, of course, if we're dedicating our lives to something that cannot be achieved, eventually we will develop excessive stress. Eventually, this will be prolonged enough that this stress will cause the emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. So this is a sort of progression. Now, different authors will have different dimensions for burnout, different names for them, but they more or less can be distilled into these three burnout dimensions. Firstly, emotional exhaustion. So we have more feelings in this dimension, feelings of being drained, of being overwhelmed by the demands of work. It's all too much to deal with, and we feel completely exhausted. Second dimension is depersonalization. This is more to do with our attitude, We start to develop a cynical or a negative attitude towards work and even towards the people that are involved in it. Doesn't matter. Some of them may even be our friends. We may even like them. But over time, this negative attitude will develop towards them as well. And finally, a more of a work dimension related to reduced personal accomplishment. So when we feel like our skills, our competence is decreased and we cannot achieve anything in our work. Now we have some examples that will maybe help you relate to these theoretical concepts. What is it that we feel? What is it that we think in each dimension? Now, emotional exhaustion. We say things and think things like, I feel very tired. We wake up in the morning and we think, I don't feel like going to work. And we think things like, I feel like work has taken over my life. We feel overwhelmed. It's too much. All the work tasks are just too much for us. As for the second dimension, the more attitude, more related to attitudes, depersonalization, we feel that we have no patience for anyone or anything. We have no patience for tasks or for people. We feel like, well, I don't care what happens. I don't care. It's all the same to me. Whatever happens, I don't care. I have become insensitive. And sometimes this happens to things that used to mean a lot to us, that used to be very important to us, but we've become desensitized. And finally, more of a work dimension, our low personal accomplishment, where we think things like, well, I don't know why I do this. Everything has lost interest. I have no goals. Nothing gets me excited. I feel like day in and day out, I do the same thing, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really care. And it just doesn't really matter to me. So again, this is being a very negative presentation. I don't know, we should have maybe changed the subject to something more pleasant, but fear not, because now we go into the intervention, which is, well, where we can have a little hope that things can change, that we can do something to change this bleak outlook. So typically, we divide our intervention into three different levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention. I'm sure that when you think of psychologists, both me and Professor Rui are psychologists, probably you'll think more about tertiary intervention. It's important, okay? Both of us, we do it. All psychologists do it, or most of them at least. It's very important, but the most interesting, at least to both of us, and here I know I speak for both of us, the most interesting one is definitely primary intervention. So when we do primary intervention, we look and try to change organizational culture and structure. We try to provide professional training, and we try to organize work in different ways, in ways that are more adaptive and that facilitate good performance and good mental health. Now, this happens, okay? Primary intervention does happen, fortunately. Not as much as we would like, maybe, but it does happen. Why is this so interesting to us? Well, when you change a culture, an organizational culture, you're doing things in a way that someone who comes for the first time to the organization will have a culture and a structure that will be conducive to a good functioning. On the other hand, if you have a bad organizational culture, the best people in the world will eventually start feeling demoralized and may eventually suffer from burnout, because the culture and the structure is not conducive to good work, to good mental health. So things will be harder and harder and harder. When we do intervention, primary intervention, we can reach a lot more people in less time, and we can have an impact in future people that aren't even there yet, but will be one day and will benefit from the system. So we believe this is a very interesting level of intervention. When we talk about secondary intervention, we're talking about things like the relational environment between people, adaptation to work, how people adapt to work, how teams adapt to work, how people make decisions as a team, as a group, and how this impacts workers. And finally, maybe I believe it is the most common one, at least so far, tertiary intervention, which is a lot more individual. So we try and change life habits. We implement occupational medicine and work therapy. And this does have an impact, a good impact, fortunately. But we can do more. So Professor Hui, please take it on.
Okay, many thanks, Liliana. Very good ideas. So to end our presentation, some final notes about how to perform better regarding occupational stress. Well, let's start by the opposite, thinking about things that do not increase our ability to deal with stress. So we could say that managing stress worse is thinking and acting as if nothing were happening. It's quite interesting, this first idea. It's related to denial strategies to cope with stress. And it's quite general, the finding in research that using denial strategies are not so good, not only to deal with stress, but also for our health. So it's not, generally, it's not a good idea to use this kind of strategies. It's also believe that the best will happen and not wasting too much time on it. It's quite to have a positive perspective, but it's not very good in terms of strategies. It's just to believe that things will go in a better way, but not doing anything to increase the possibility of end in a better way. So it's just waiting and believe that things will happen in a good way. So it's also not a very good strategy. Third, it's the opposite of this one. It's believe that the worst will happen and spending the rest of the time thinking about it. It's having a pessimist perspective and not doing anything about it. Just wait for the worst. And it's also about making the best plan possible and believe that that's the only thing to do. So in this case, you will have a plan, but eventually not a realistic plan. Probably you have an ideal plan, but a plan that it's not very good for the specific situation you are facing. So having only one plan, not very adapted to the situation, is also not a very good way to facilitate stress adaptation. And finally, is surrounding yourself with people and circumstances where stress doesn't exist, or if it does, there's not much you can do. So it's having, it's being in a context where significant persons and circumstances, all of them says to us that stress is not there. Even though we know that stress is there and it's not a good experience for our case. So let's look at the positive perspective. So how to perform better in terms of dealing with occupational stress. First of all, the first strategy is knowing stressors well, okay? Knowing the conditions, the personal conditions, the situation conditions that gives power to the stressor. So knowing when, knowing how, where, and why the stressor occurs, it's the first main strategy. And the second one is knowing well you. It means that you have to know how you typically evaluate stress and how you typically react to stress, okay? And trying to find the best personal strategies to deal with stress. That is, the good news is that there is not a single strategy to deal with stress. There are multiple strategies to deal with stress, but the strategies are good if they are adapted to the situation and to the person. So you have to know the stressor and you have to know yourself. So it implies knowing how to balance the importance and relevance of the stressful event in your personal life. Liliane already talked about this. Not giving too much importance to the situation and not at all importance to the situation is the questions to avoid in stress management. So see the stressor in a perspective where the stressor is there as there are other things in your life. Knowing how to make the plot underlying the stress challenging. So Liliana also talked about evaluate the stressor in a threatful or on a challenging way. So the secret is to evaluate the stressor in a challenging way. It means that you should look at the stressor as an opportunity to challenge your ability to deal with a new demanding situation, okay? Just look at the stressor as a form to progress. Progress not only in the way you deal with stressor, but progress with a person, as an individual. Then it is quite important to know how to adapt coping strategies to the stressful event. So having an ideal plan and a possible plan, it's quite interesting. The ideal plan is the one that we intend to use if things happen as we expected. And the possible plan is the one that we are prepared to use if the situation is not exactly as we expected. So using more than one plan allows us to use different coping strategies. As I said before, there is not only one way to deal with stress. So knowing multiple strategies to deal with stress and then apply the one that is best for that specific stressor. And then accepting, this is very difficult to accept, that stress management is a never-ending game with an almost unpredictable outcome. It means that, in fact, we cannot control all the situation before the stressor, and even we cannot control all the factors during the exposure to the stress. So accepting this situation and knowing that we are not always all prepared to deal with stress, we are going to be in a situation where we have a strategy that can end as we expected or not as we expected. If the case is not so good for us, then we should have the perspective that we have better opportunities in the future. So it is quite dealing with occupational stress, a never-ending game. Okay, many thanks, Liliana. You can close and our presentation.
Thank you for the final positive spin. I was afraid we were depressing everyone in this room, so thank you. Now, just to finish, we would like to talk to you a bit about our project, the School of Life Skills, Escola Competências de Vida in Portuguese. So I've mentioned our research group several times. Everything that we research, we try to give back to the community in some way through our intervention programs, our School of Life Skills. And here we have our 6 programs in 6 different areas, 6 different life skills that for us are those most important to, well, to try and lead a successful and positive life. And we start with the Pro Action program, which our program on the promotion of motivation. That is the basis of everything. Without motivation, there is nothing else, we believe. There's no action, there's no, well, we don't actually do anything if we don't feel motivated to it. So that's our first big program. Then on to time management, because, well, after we're motivated, we have to be able to manage our time successfully in order to be successful in our tasks. Stress management, which we have been talking here for the past, well, 45 minutes or so, to teach us how to deal with unexpected consequences, unexpected problems that arise in our daily lives. And then the last 3 life skills are more relational, okay, more related to our relationships. So communication, that one is absolutely fundamental. And I'm not saying it just because that's the course I'm teaching this semester. It's because it really is, okay? I'm sure Professor Rui will say it's leadership, but no, communication. How we communicate with each other, with our teams, with our colleagues, with our families, with our organizations. Leadership, very crucial also, especially when we have leadership roles in our jobs. And teamwork, finally, how we work as teams and how we can achieve goals working as teams. Now, these from these 6 life skills, we have 3 programs running right now, partnering with Aliança here. Now, for now, we have communication, stress management, and leadership. All 3 of them are functioning this semester. We will eventually have the others, I believe, but well, we don't know when, but we will have them. So if you are interested in any of these programs, please reach out to us, reach out to Aliança, and I am sure that we will find a way to work together. Thank you very much for listening to us. It was a pleasure to have almost 50 people listening to this topic. And we also left you with our websites, our research and intervention websites. Please feel free to contact us. And I believe we have some minutes here now for a few questions, comments.
Oi, me escutam?
Yes, I don't know if anyone has any question. Alonso?
Oi, tudo bem? It has to be in English, right? So everyone can understand because this is transmitted, I think, in different countries, no?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a student in the University of Minho, and I'm a designer in Guimarães, in the campus of Surrey. And I signed up for this Zoom specifically because first and foremost, I'm from Mexico, and I'm studying abroad here. I'm living abroad here, and it has been quite challenging to move abroad. And at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, Portugal! Oh, University of Minho! It's gonna be like a piece of cake, everything, no?" And doing the language and all the work that it implies being in Portugal. At some point last year, I was like, "Oh, this is like so stressful, you know." And I know how it is to be stressed, even almost burnout. And I really like your presentation. I really like the idea of addressing those kind of issues and opening up and saying, okay, I'm acting this way, or I'm acting that way, or I'm feeling this low, or feeling that low, because I feel stressed, and now I feel I can talk to someone and say, okay, how we can make an intervention and deal with this thing. I think one key thing that makes me the most stressed about my experience, it's a little bit the motivation. When you have these motivations here, and then are the expectations of the professors or your job, even if you work and study, and sometimes it doesn't meet your expectations. And I feel like a problem that has happened with my studies has been that I have this much expectations, and the professors are here in University Minute and say, oh, Alonso, like, come on, don't have that much expectations, it's just this. Or maybe it's just a little bit like, maybe we're going in this age where we are becoming more with apathy with one another. We dehumanize one another. And I think that has been one content issue with stress. No, maybe other person doesn't hear you, or just sees you, or doesn't feel like you're physically there. So motivations are not met, and we feel more stressed.
Alonso, well, muchas gracias. I have to show that I also speak a bit of Spanish. Thank you very much for your comment. It's actually very, very interesting because you touched on a few quite interesting points. So one of the strategies that we teach in our courses on stress management is precisely to manage your expectations, to reorganize or reformulate your expectations, especially when something like what you've just described is happening, where you have very high expectations for something, and then when you actually start doing it, you realize that, at least for now, you can't meet them. There's a very large gap between them. When that happens, there's a very, very high likelihood that stress will also develop. So that's one of our strategies, is to try and adapt your goals and your expectations so that they are more, I'm missing the word, they're more realistic. Okay, more realistic regarding your conditions right now, regarding your context and your abilities right now. I would say also, well, but this is, I'm not sure, I don't think this is very scientific actually, but from what I can see, yes, I agree that nowadays it seems like people are a lot more focused on themselves, more preoccupied with their own things, with their own problems, with their own stresses, with their own lives. And that makes them a bit less attentive to other people, to what other people are feeling and to what other people are experiencing. But that's in no way scientific, okay? I have no scientific data. It's just what I feel, so to speak. And finally, let me just say, because I have another question here through the chat. I'm not sure if it's okay to say this. I hope so. As you say, you studied at the University of Minho, right? The design.
Me? Yes.
Okay, so there is a phone line that you can call, that all the community, all the academic community here at the university can call. That's for crisis, to deal with a crisis. So you're connected with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I believe, and you're just on the phone and you get talked through whatever crisis you may be experiencing at the moment. And well, I believe it's a very good service. It's free, and especially for people who come from other countries and who may be feeling alone in the first few weeks or the first few months. It may be an important resource, because dealing with stress is also having resources and actually using them. Well, just a suggestion, okay? I have a question here. So from what I heard, many of the motifs and ways to deal with stress are very relatable to anxiety. Are those emotions similar or are there big differences? From Antonio Rodrigues. Well, anxiety is one reaction to stress. So it's probably the most common reaction to stress, but it's a reaction to stress. Okay, it's an emotion, it's a reaction. Stress, as we saw, has all those three components, the factors, the way we look at things, and the outcome. We also have Marcus with a raised hand.
Yes, hello, Marcos from University of Minho here. Thank you for your talk. I would like to know if there are some strategies when you are already inside this burnout and you have already lost all your motivation, what will be the best way to try to recover this motivation to want to keep working and doing your best?
Typically, when we are already in burnout phases, we would suggest professional help. Okay, so I'd like to keep that very, very clear. All our courses, including the stress one, are geared towards a personal development path. So we do not deal in that course with more pathological issues. If that's the case, we strongly suggest seeking professional help. There are lots of very good psychologists, very good psychiatrists, very good mental health professionals that can and will help. But that is a step above what we do in our programs. I'm sorry, Marcos, I know this isn't the answer you were looking for, but it is the possible one.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Oh, fear, yes, Sylvia is asking, fear greatly influences my stress and anxiety levels. How can we deal with this innate human capacity for survival? Yes. Well, this is one of the problems with evolution, is that evolution is too slow. All these fears, all this stress, all these symptoms are very adaptive if we think about the way we used to live many years ago, when we lived in the woods hunting animals and stuff like that. Those paths, those feelings continue to impact our performance in our daily lives. And what we have noticed, and this is scientific, okay, this is from our research, fear is typically, it's very common to be the number one factor contributing to stress. I can tell you more when it comes to sports, but I'm pretty sure that it's the same in other areas. In sports, the biggest contributor to stress and anxiety is the fear of making mistakes, typically. So how can we deal with fear? Well, mainly by trying to change our cognitive appraisal. Okay, cognitive appraisal is the foundation of our stress model. So the stress factors, well, we can do something about them, but they are present, they exist. There's not a lot we can do to change them. Where we can change the most and where we can have the most impact is in cognitive appraisal, the way we look at things, the way we perceive the way we perceive the situation, and the way we perceive our own skills and our own emotions, etc. So trying to change how you perceive your fear can be a way to deal with this emotion and to try and positively impact stress and anxiety levels. Now, no problem. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions, comments? You're always free to contact us through our emails and social network things. Well, that was quite perfect. 10:59. British punctuality.
Yes.
Well, as far as vitamin B, I have no idea, Manuel. I'm sorry, but it is not my area of expertise, far from it. I do have some colleagues from neuroscience who might be able to help, but honestly, I'm sorry, I have no idea. Electric feeling in the hands related to anxiety. I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Is it a nervous reaction, a response? I'm thinking that that's what you mean when you have physical reactions to stress. If it's that what you mean, yes, that is very common. Reactions to stress can be also physical, things like your heart beating too fast, your hands shaking or sweating too much, and also these electrical feelings you're mentioning. A few techniques that work quite well with these particular symptoms are diaphragmatic breathing. So learning how to breathe in a different way, that helps a lot, and it's quite easy to learn. It takes a bit of practice, but it's quite easy to learn, and it has a very, very positive impact. And other related relaxation techniques, such as a progressive muscle relaxation, also has quite an impact in these areas. Thank you, Manuel. Hope I've helped.
Yes. So I think it was a great kickstart for this meeting, for this program of talks. Thank you very much. As we know, stress is a problem that affects a lot of people, so especially higher education students. So I think this was a very nice introduction to the topic, and I believe maybe it will help doors for a greater exploration of the theme in the future. Thank you.